Okay, thank you. So welcome to this month's Modesto Chamber Leadership Series. I'm Trish Christensen. I'm the president and CEO of the Modesto Chamber of Commerce. Our leadership Modesto Steering Committee, along with Kate Trumpeter and myself, developed the concept for a Visions of Leadership series. Leadership is a passion within this group. We wanted to create a format in which we could bring people together to share leadership perspectives, to be inspired by the efforts of strong leaders, and to learn from one another. Of all the things this past year has taught us, a need for good leadership has proven crucial, and strong leadership is needed in many arenas. Governmental leadership is obvious, but what about the business and workplace? What about in our homes and our families? Do leaders just lead, or do they also inspire hope? That too depends on the arena, but also on the leader. Who we look to for guidance, for examples, or for answers varies by which arena we are dealing with at a given time. Today's conversation will focus on leading in business when everything gets disruptive. And we all know this past year, we've all experienced that. And I want to thank Stephanie Gallo for joining us for this discussion. I'd like to take a moment to ask any of you that are actually on the Leadership Modesto Steering Committee or have been in Leadership Modesto to just raise your hand or do a quick shout out. So we got a few of you on here. Awesome. Now I'm happy to introduce our facilitator, Kate Trumpeter, and invite you to share your vision and goal for today's conversation.
Thank you, Trish. And thanks everybody for being here. I'm so excited to see all these names that I recognize, a few that I don't, but super looking forward to this conversation. Trish, would you mind pinning my video and Stephanie's video just so folks can see our faces? So I have a couple of requests to make. And then I'm going to get to introducing myself and our guest, and then to our questions. As we all have experienced, we're spending a lot of time in virtual spaces on Zoom. So just inviting you to pay attention to any background noise that might be coming from your computers and keep yourselves muted, unless you have a question, in which case we're also inviting this to be highly interactive. Feel free to use the chat to submit questions that I may not be asking or that may arise for you, and we'll certainly create some space at the end for people to ask questions of our guest as well. And if it's possible, although I know it may not be for some, I'd love for you to have your cameras on. So it's not a have-to requirement for being here today, but it's as a facilitator who spends a lot of time on Zoom, it's just really nice to be able to see people's faces, reactions, and hi, Chris, thanks. So if it's possible, I love it. And I'll just acknowledge that some of us are working in weird places. So I get visited by people's birds and their kids and their partners, and like, it's all good, because that's just the moment we're living in. Okay, so I am Kate Trumpeter. I'm a local to Stanislaus County native Modestan leadership coach who works pretty exclusively with nonprofits and public agencies on change management and the role of leadership in sort of making progress on big social issues, quality of life conditions, those types of things for our youth and families in Stanislaus County. I'm a graduate of Leadership Modesto 2010, best class ever. And also have had the real pleasure of knowing Stephanie Gallo in a couple of different ways over the course of my time, at least as a grown-up in Modesto. So I'm just really excited that she said yes to spending an hour with us today. I'm just going to say a few things about Stephanie that I'm aware of, and then invite her to add anything that she'd like to add about herself before we get into some of our questions. But as many of you know, she's the vice president of marketing at E&J Gallo Winery in Modesto, and as all of you I think probably know, it's the largest family-owned winery in the world. A real source of pride for our community, I think, that it's been centered and grounded here, that they've given and worked in the ways that that family has in this community for as long as they have. Stephanie's done a lot of really important things at the winery as far as I'm concerned. So there's her role in her work with Barefoot and other brands, and managing, globally different brands for the winery. But I've also had the pleasure of watching Stephanie lead her teams and be a leader in the community. I find her to be exceptionally generous and patient and creative. I find her to be very relational. These are all qualities that I value in leaders in this community and beyond. So it felt like kind of a no-brainer when we wanted to focus on business to have the opportunity to talk with her. And then the last thing I'll say is that I spend a lot of time thinking about what disruption means for us in our work and our lives. And when things are disrupted or interrupted, much in the way that they have been with COVID, it's the moment we tend to sort of return to our very habitual responses. When stress occurs, it sometimes is when businesses fail, right? Or it's when we resort back to those practices that maybe don't serve us well. So I invited Stephanie to share some of her thoughts about the role of disruption in business as we reflect on this last year and how Gallo Winery has navigated that as an organization, but also Stephanie as an individual. Stephanie, hi.
Hi.
Would you add anything about yourself that you'd like people to know before we get into some more concrete questions?
No, I think you definitely talked about me on a professional level, but I think the most important role and job that I have is, one of a wife and a mother. So some of you know my husband, Chris Tyler, who he is an amazing partner to me. And I have 2 children, Emily and Harrison. So I think those are the most important job titles that anyone can have.
I appreciate you bringing that in, and I agree. And I also think that it reminds me too to say that I believe really firmly that leadership takes a lot of different forms and shapes, and it isn't just people who are in positions of authority and decision making. And so I'm certainly experiencing the benefits of my husband really leading in our family over the past year. And I know that Chris Tyler is also somebody who leads in a number of different ways, including as a part of your family unit in the same way that you do. So excellent. Okay, so our intention is to go for the next half hour or a little more. And as I said, ask questions if they come up. But we're just going to start by inviting Stephanie to talk to us about how she defines leadership in general.
By the way, your questions were really good and thought-provoking. So it really caused just a moment of reflection. But at its core, I fundamentally believe that leadership is an opportunity to serve others. And what that looks like is that you have to be attentive to those that are under your charge. You have to empower them. And I think as a leader, you have a responsibility to develop your folks to their fullest potential. So, I hope that what you will get from me is that leadership is just a wonderful opportunity to serve others. And that's how I define leadership.
That's awesome. And it made me think too about what we were just saying about all the opportunities there are to lead.
Yep.
And so as I think about your definition, it certainly is, I'm just aware that that happens in my community, my neighborhood, and my family, and also in my business. So I love that. So one of the questions that I had for you is, what do you feel is more true? Were you born a natural leader, or did you learn to be a leader?
So I reflected on this, and let me tell you, it's both, only because I'm the oldest. And I'm the oldest of 3. And when I look back on my leadership journey, I think that when you're the oldest of 3, you learn to be a leader. And, just to give you a context, I don't know if many of you know this, but my mom's from Nicaragua. In 1979, my grandparents came to live with us, and they didn't speak any English. And, my dad, he spent the majority of his career in sales and often, traveling internationally to help grow our company. And my mom would often, not often, but on occasion, she would go with him. So I was at home, with my brothers, being the oldest of 3. And, I remember having to step up. My grandparents didn't speak English. They were in charge of us, but whether it was making a doctor's appointment or signing, permission slips or helping to translate, I think that, sometimes you don't ask to be a leader, you're just kind of put in that situation. And I think that I learned to be a leader because I was the oldest of a family of 3.
I saw a lot of people nodding their heads like similar experiences.
Yeah.
I'm a middle child, so.
Yeah, I think middle children, but I think that's, I often, I do think birth order makes a difference, but I think that when you're the oldest sister of 2 brothers, you tend to have to step up and fill that role.
Yeah. What about other moments in your life where like there have been pivotal people or like, a training you went to or a book? Like, in what ways do you think you've tended to your own development, or has it been developed for you?
Um, I believe in situational leadership. I think that from a professional standpoint, um, I when you kind of look through my leadership journey, yes, I was student body president. Yes, I, was an RA on campus. But I think the best, when I think about my formative experiences, it's really around leading a team. And, I started in our organization as a sales representative. And the first time that I had direct reports, I was the age of 24, and I had 6 direct reports, and I had to lead a team towards accomplishing a goal. And, I think that probably, was perhaps the most formative, defining moment. I think the other is, one of the questions that you ask is, who's the leader that you admire the most? I would say it was my dad, Joe, who, was our CEO up until last June. He constantly put me in positions to lead when I didn't think I have the confidence to lead or I had the capability to lead. And I think that he provided an environment where it gave me the opportunity to step up, rise to the challenge, knowing that if I failed, it would be okay. So, I think that just being put in a position where you just have to figure it out is how I've learned to lead. Yes, I've read books. Yes, I've gone and spoken to other people, but that's all kind of intellectual. It isn't until you're forced to lead a team and serve them that you really develop the courage to lead and move forward.
Yeah, there's like one of the things that I'm really hoping people might get out of these very short little lunchtime leadership chats is like some little nuggets you could think about when you leave here today. And a couple things that I heard you just say is, that your dad put you in positions to lead even when you didn't think you were capable, like taking risks on people.
Yep.
And that it was okay for you to fail. And so the leadership you're describing in your dad, sorry, there's like something flying around in my office. The leadership qualities you're describing in your dad, I think, are ones we could aspire to embody too, which is like, how do we invest in the people around us? How do we take risks? How do we make it okay for people to fail, knowing that that's part of their learning?
It's part of their journey.
Yeah.
It's part of their journey. And everyone will, like, it's even coaching people through it. Like that's part of, the development of serving others. But, we're going through this period right now where we're giving everyone performance assessments. And, I believe feedback is a gift. And I think that the ultimate form of respect is candor. And sometimes people don't want to necessarily hear it, but I am constantly telling folks, like, we owe it to our employees to be respectful and give them the candid feedback, because that's the only way that they're going to grow and develop into future leaders.
Yeah. When you use the language coaching, can you describe what you mean by that? Is it something that Gallo does? Is it something you do?
Oh, I think it's a great question. It's something that I hope we all do. I think that, again, if you believe in the notion of being a servant leader, one of the tenets is really around how do you develop people into their full capacity or their full potential. And I think coaching is an element of that. I don't know if you've played sports, but a great coach, sets the bar high. They practice with you, they train you. And then when it's time to play the game, it's on you, but they're on the sidelines helping you kind of get through whatever you need to get through. And I think that's part of what we all need to do.
So I have another question that came from that analogy. So I love the sports analogies. I often use music analogies like symphony orchestras and conductors and like what it means to be in different positions. So if you're like, when you said the coach thing, I started imagining different kinds of coaches. Like there's the ones that just scream at you really loud when you screw up. And then there's ones that maybe show up differently. How would you describe yourself if you were a coach on the sidelines?
I was laughing because you don't want to see me as a parent on a sideline because I'm that parent. I like to coach people and meet them where they're at. It's really spending time to figure out what motivates someone, I have 5, 6 direct reports and they're all different. And there's some that, I speak to once a week. There's others that I speak to 3 times a day because that's what they need at that time. It depends on the project. It depends on an initiative that we're working on. I don't think that there is a consistent approach other than you have to meet people. You have to meet people where they are and how you can best respond. And I think that's what a coach does, is that they flex their style in order to get the best out of the athlete that's under their charge.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris, seeing that you're using the chat. I love it. So let's talk about disruption a little bit more specifically. So there isn't anybody in this room that hasn't experienced the disruption of COVID, and what that's meant for our working lives, our personal lives, our communities, and so on. It's a case study for me in many ways of like, what are the kinds of competencies and skills that get us through moments when everything gets turned upside down, and how we respond in those moments, makes or breaks groups, relationships, organizations, and so on. So, how has disruption shown up for you guys, Stephanie, like at Gallo?
Well, it's interesting. So we're in business, and so we have to respond to consumer behavior. And I was just talking to someone about this an hour ago. Never in my professional career has consumer behavior shifted within a matter of days. I mean, radically shifted in a matter of days. And so we had to pivot. We had to be flexible. We really had to rely on our corporate values to meet the needs of our consumers and our customers. And one aspect of the business may have collapsed while another aspect of the business may have accelerated. And so, it was disrupted because consumer behavior was disrupted. So we had to pivot overnight to meet the needs of our consumers in many ways, as well as our community. So whether it's, we could go on and on about ways that we were disrupted, but our assortment changed overnight. People all of a sudden were turning to big brands, big trusted brands. Our supply chain demand spiked, and we had to pivot. At the same time, certain aspects of our business were shut down, like in hospitality. It was very important for us that we kept our folks employed, so we pivoted folks to other aspects of our business that were growing. While on-premise shut down, e-commerce accelerated, and thank God we had made an investment in our commerce stack to be able to accommodate that. I even think about our company's decision to produce hand sanitizer. We didn't make hand sanitizer, and the fact that we were able to pivot within a week to produce hand sanitizers for our own frontline employees, but for our community, was something that we had to do. So yeah, we were disrupted, but I think that one of our core values as a company is innovation. And I think that if you lean into your core values, you rise to the occasion and you figure out ways to meet the needs of your consumers, your employees, and your community members.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about just the disruption that happened on a personal and individual level for all your employees, in addition to like these very structural or like ways of doing workflow process. So I'm thinking about this word pivot, and Trish put something in the chat too that it takes great intention to do it well. Sometimes it happens on accident and it goes okay. And you had mentioned too that you were forced to change because your consumer behavior changed. And so it's not like you decided to make a pivot. It was forced upon you, like it was for most of us. You talked about flexibility, responsiveness, innovation. Do you have a sense that like you guys had sort of prepared for this in some way, even though you didn't know it was coming? Like what made you able to pivot?
I think that there were a couple things. When COVID, so we're celebrating, I don't know if it's celebrating, but we're a year to the day where we went virtual. And I think that when you're leading in uncertain times, you really have to lean into your intuition. you don't have time to overthink it. And I started a thing that was with my group, my immediate team, that I just decided to extend to our entire company. And I have this thing called CMO Live, where every Monday I update my own immediate team as to what's going on. And what started to happen was that other aspects of our organization just wanted to know what was going on. And so immediately I just invited the whole company. I didn't ask. I mean, it helps that I don't have to ask, but I didn't ask. And every Monday we have 1,000 people throughout our entire company, throughout the world, that join this. And it's a way where I set the tone. And from the beginning, a year ago, I said to the organization that the way that we're going to operate under these uncertain times is that we're going to operate with a tremendous amount of flexibility, empathy, and compassion. Because while things are crazy at work, we also knew too that our employees were going through disruption in their personal lives. And so flexibility means that, yes, we're going to be on video conference, and yes, there's going to be kids in the background. Empathy means that people were getting sick and at home, not necessarily here, but they were dealing with, the fact that family members might have been sick, or all of a sudden you're expected to be a homeschool parent. That we just needed to give people the empathy and the grace and the compassion to figure life out. And I think as a leader, giving people the permission to operate in those manners, I think really helped us, as what people are telling me, helped. It was just set the tone for what we needed to do. So I just did it. And I think that when you're being disrupted personally and professionally, leaders need to step up and fill a vacuum. And I don't know if I intentionally did it, but I just knew that's what our organization needed at the time. They needed to hear from the family that it's okay to be flexible, empathetic, and compassionate. And even on calls, like I remember an employee said to me, "But Stephanie, you said it's okay to be flexible. I just need to work after 5 because I have to help my kids do their work from 1 to 5. Is that okay?" Absolutely. As long as you get the work done, I don't care when you get it done.
Yeah, I have a couple questions coming out of that. One is just about you deciding to communicate with the whole of the organization in that way, and how many people you have showing up to these calls. What do you think? Like, why do you think that matters to people, that kind of communication?
In absence of not communicating regularly, people make up their own stories.
Yeah.
And so in life, you can control events, or events can control you. And I quickly felt that events were quickly going to control us. And, just employees wanted to know what was going on, even basics like, and I gave examples. This is what we're doing as a company to be empathetic. This is what we're doing to be flexible. Things like, are we going to be making hand sanitizer? The answer is yes, we are. But just to be able to communicate it, to say, yes, we are making hand sanitizer. Here's pictures of it. By the way that we're going to be making hand sanitizer is that we need employee volunteers to come in and work 24/7 to get this out the door. Please sign up. We had to fill a vacuum. And I think that that's what leaders do, is provide guidance and visibility, because in absence of that, people are going to make up their own stories.
And did you witness anybody struggle with your expectation that the organization would extend that grace and that empathy and that flexibility?
I don't know. Maybe I'm out of touch. It's so hard. One of my leadership styles is to walk around, and I haven't been able to walk around in a year. But I think that if you say that you're going to be empathetic, I think you have to model the behavior. So I was doing CMO Live from my kitchen table. I know Layla was one of my guests. Dogs barking in the back, kids showing up on Zoom screen, and just people log on to CMO Live because there will be a technical failure. And I think that, modeling that and being vulnerable, I think it showed people that it's okay, that we're all going through it. I'm starting to come back into work because what I'm trying to signal to people is that now that we have our vaccines, it's okay to come back into work. And, I'm modeling that it's safe to be here. So there's little things that I'm trying to do to demonstrate that we can be flexible, empathetic, and compassionate.
Do you think there are opportunities that have arisen? I mean, a lot of people talk about them like silver linings and those types of things, but like of all the things you guys are learning throughout this last year, what opportunities has it created that you might continue to leverage or think about?
For sure, embracing, we're figuring this out. We don't have an answer to this, but a much more flexible work style. I think that, what we've realized is that people can be just as effective remotely. However, we don't need to travel as much as we used to. We can be very efficient doing meetings virtually. Connecting with our consumers, quite candidly, has been a blessing. Embracing technology to be able to democratize experiences that only used to be available by visiting our, properties up in Napa. But what I will tell you is people are tired.
You're welcome.
Oh, hold on, Stephanie, you're muted.
Went to click the one that had the background noise and the gold, and I clicked the speaker. I apologize. You'll have to unmute, Stephanie. I don't think I can do it. I apologize for that.
That's an example when it happens in real life, to say, we're going to be empathetic and compassionate. These things happen. I think people are tired. I think that I added respect this year to being empathetic, compassionate, and flexible. We have to be respectful, and I think people are tired. And I think that that what we're realizing is that collaboration is missing, and it's hard to truly collaborate virtually. So there's a lot of silver linings, but I'm missing some of the benefits of being together in person.
So when you said people were tired, like of all the screens I can see, people were nodding their heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that really resonates with people.
Tired. And I think that's, as a leader, that's what I'm struggling with, is how do I keep people motivated during this time? And no one has a great answer. Every other CMO that I talk to at major companies is dealing with the same thing. So it's not unique to us. But what I will tell you is that when Stanislaus County last week made the announcement that ag workers were eligible for the vaccine, it brought so much joy and hope to our employees. They're so happy. And I think that's the boost that people needed, that there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't know if anyone works for Stanislaus County, but the way that you have handled the vaccine rollout has been amazing. I think it's truly best in class. I talked to colleagues in New York and New Jersey and Oregon, and what they're dealing with is not cool. But the way that we're doing it, we should be very, very proud of how we're doing it.
There's another question that's coming up for me about you talked about when the vaccines became available last week to agriculture and how much joy that brought people, and that we'd been in this for so long. It really took an external event to create that joy for your employees. Have you guys done anything beyond like the information you've been sharing and the sort of invitation to be flexible? How are you trying to create the joy over the last year or so for your staff?
It's still celebrating micro moments. I think that has been the key. I was on a phone call with someone, I have a brand team where they have a thematic lunch every week. I think today is like burgers and shakes. Next week is going to be, I don't know what they're doing. But, we did something during Halloween. Chris knows this. We do this thing called Spirit Week. And Halloween, it's like the week where we all dress up and we all kind of, celebrate our spirit. And we decided to do a Halloween parade for kids and employees. And it was great. Like, yes, it was weird. It was COVID, but we did a Halloween drive-through. All the adults got a free case of wine and kids got candy. So, I'm thinking as I drove in today, I'm wondering if we should do one for Easter. There's like little events that we can do safely that I'm thinking, what can we do to show people that we care about them and that we're thinking about them.
That's great. So, if it's okay, which I think it is because I showed you these questions beforehand, I'd really like to talk about just you as Stephanie, the person, in the last year. Um, so I'm curious how you've responded over the last year to everything. Like, what has felt natural to you? What's been hard? Have you made mistakes along the way?
Um, I think that, I have a saying that leaders lead, and I really have relied on my intuition. And you have to make decisions sometimes without all the information, without all the facts, and you just have to move forward. I find that that is better than not making a decision because you will paralyze an organization. So I've had to rely on my intuition, and I knew that if I failed, we would fix it. You don't have to be, one of my sayings is progress, not perfection. So yeah, I just realized that look, we've had, in not only with us, like we had COVID, we had social unrest, we had wildfires. In the middle of all that, we were changing CEOs and we were integrating a new acquisition. And the level of change that our organization is going through or has gone through is a lot. And you have to lead from the front. You have to make the decisions. And yes, we've made mistakes. I think that, and we listen to our employees, but when COVID first happened, we were communicating kind of what I would call meta decisions, and feedback was, well, it seems like we're not putting the health and safety of our employees first. And so we adjusted our internal communications to ensure that the decisions that we were making and giving people the context of it. So yeah, I think that people give each other grace, and, we're trying to figure it out. And I would say that you're going to make mistakes, but not acting and not leading is worse than being scared that you're going to go ahead and make a mistake.
Yeah, I really love that, like progress, not perfection. I think that our traditional understanding of leadership is to like have all the answers, to know the things, to not mess up. And so I just love that you reflecting on, yeah, what your observations and your own behavior in the last year, just not being at all about having all the answers because it wasn't possible,
You don't have, and being vulnerable and transparent about it. I don't have the answers, but this is what we're going to do. And we'll pivot, and, we'll be flexible. But yeah, I think being transparent and being vulnerable gives you grace as a leader to navigate during these uncertain times.
Yeah, I want to stay with that for just a second because I think a lot about the role of self-awareness in leadership. And I think that being vulnerable is part of that. But I'm just wondering, like, do you think about the role of self-awareness in your own leadership? Is it something Gallo thinks about?
I think everyone, look, there's different ways that you can get self-awareness. One is just truly being true to yourself, asking for feedback. It's my husband holds a wonderful mirror up every day, as do my children. And so, I think that one of the questions that you are going to ask later is, what do you think is the most important trait of any leader? And I think it's humility. I think that if you're a humble person, you're constantly reflecting and asking, how can I be better? And once you get the feedback, do you have enough fortitude to pivot and change behavior? I think is critical.
Yeah. And I'm also like a couple of times this theme of feedback being a gift is arising. And I just think that's so important.
My team will say feedback's a pill. Like when I say, okay, feedback's a gift, they know what's coming, but, and also it gives them permission to say, Stephanie, you always say feedback's a gift. I'm going to give you some feedback. I'm like, okay, great. But yeah, feedback is a gift.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. And it's, there's something that I like to talk about, like everything that we hear and see observe and experience is just data for
Yeah.
us, pointing at something. It's helping us to grow and learn. And if we can offer feedback as though it's a gift and receive it as though it's a gift, like that really is in service to our growth
Yeah.
and development. So I love.
I think that one of the things that has really also helped navigate as a leader is really being clear on what your values are. And I think that it's one of the questions that I think that you were going to ask, but I cut you off. I apologize. But, at Gallo, we have pretty strong corporate values. It's respect, innovation, commitment, teamwork, and humility. That's how we expect everyone to get the work done. And then we have the 4E framework for leaders, because we think anyone in the organization, regardless of your level, can be a leader. And what does that look like? Can you envision opportunity? Can you enlist others? Can you engage a team? And can you execute with excellence? And that delivers results. So I think that as a leader, you have to deliver results, but how you deliver results is just as important. And it needs to be in accordance to your own personal values. I think that leaders, you make difficult decisions every day. And as one of my brothers said to me, if you can put your head down at night on your pillow and feel that you operated within the confines of your values, you're fine. And I think that having a good center and a good understanding as to what your corporate values are, what your personal values are, and if they're not violated in making a decision, I think it's helpful.
Yeah, that's great. So, one sort of last question I have just about Gallo as an organization, and then we'll go to our lightning round. Is can you just talk for a minute about how E&J Gallo Winery thinks about leadership development? You just talked about everyone has the opportunity to lead, so I'm just curious, maybe on behalf of everyone, what kinds of opportunities are you offering people? How is it integrated into the institution and so on, the culture?
So prior to COVID, we have, the second you walk in, we first of all interview and screen based on the corporate values. So, I think that, like I said, the how is just as important as the what. Are you respectful? Talk to me about innovation. Are you a humble person? Are you committed? And then we do have classes around what we call Gallo Leadership Fundamentals. And we talk about the 4Es and the way that pulls through. And I also believe too, that you can lead and not have any direct reports. So the way that it pulls through on both the corporate values as well as the 4Es is in your performance assessment. So, how have you envisioned opportunity? You can have the best idea, but if you can't enlist others or engage others or quite candidly execute your ideas, it doesn't matter. So, it's just, we train against it. We give people opportunities to demonstrate it. And then you have to measure people against it as well. So, that's how we do it.
Yeah. And I find often, with organizations that I work with too, we're good at articulating in many instances our values and leadership competencies that we care about, but we're not always good at measuring whether anyone's showing up in that way. And I love what you said too about not having direct reports. This is a way of showing up in the world.
If someone says to me, I need a direct report to demonstrate leadership, I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. You can be an individual contributor and be an amazing leader. And I think sometimes it's hard. I recently, Antonio Lucio, for those of you that are marketing, he just retired. He was the former CMO of Facebook, and he did his farewell goodbye to the industry. And he really talks about the three phases of leadership, where you're going to lead from the front. Sometimes you're going to lead from the middle, and sometimes you're going to lead from behind. And it's just, again, situational leadership. It just depends on your role and what you're asked to do. And I think that also sometimes right now in my current job, I'm leading from the middle a lot. It's a new skill for me, but you're constantly evolving depending on the situation.
Yeah. So Stephanie, I'm gonna ask if there's anything you feel like you want to say or add about leadership before I get to some of these little questions at the end
No, I think
here.
you've done a great job.
Okay, cool. Are there any questions that people, I saw some like affirming comments in the chat, which I love. Are there questions anyone feels like they want to ask that didn't get addressed? It's the obligatory wait as long as it takes someone to unmute themselves on Zoom.
Okay, I'll have a question. And hi, Kate.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you.
You're welcome, and good to see you too. Stephanie, because it's popped up in chat, and I think I have felt it many times. Leaders, we've been cheerleaders, we've been leaders through this whole process, right? Of COVID shutdowns and terrible civil unrest and things that you're talking about, and then still leading an organization. And I found after Christmas that all of a sudden I felt like I needed to be led. I kind of ran out of gas. So it was like I had to put down my pom-poms and I needed somebody to cheerlead me. So I was able to kind of get through that, and I feel just recharged and re-energized. I don't exactly know what I did other than laying back a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could speak to that. What happens when a leader needs to be led? Or expertise?
I think that I know what you're talking about. I saw in the chat you called it ennui. Around the same time, and I really said to myself, okay, I got to snap out of this. I think part of it is just, I know this is going to sound basic, but really figuring out, okay, what recharges you. And so I decided to really prioritize a couple things. I know this is going to sound so basic, but Chris and I at night will walk our 10,000 steps right after work. Just getting physical exercise helps. In the morning, I'm very sacred about my morning ritual. I love working in the morning or getting up in the morning because it's the time when no one's bothering. But it involves, reading, drinking coffee, working out, and and for me, I say a little prayer just to kind of get things going, but just being really sacred to the morning ritual. So I'm an introvert. I project extrovert, but I'm an introvert. And so for me, it was just really important that I found time to figure out where my energy, what my energy is. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Anyone else? I think that was such a great question, and also just highlighting the importance of our taking care of ourselves, and Kathy, surrounding ourselves with peers who can cheer us on.
Yeah.
I found that really important for myself as well, just having that really solid support system around me. Okay, so this is the second one of these that we've done, and I had this vision for if you've ever watched Inside the Actors Studio where they ask those questions at the end. That's sort of what I was attempting to get at, and Stephanie did answer some of them, but this is a don't think too much about it kind of thing. So you already answered this one, but who's the leader you admire most?
Joe Gallo.
And do you have do you have any nicknames?
Steph.
Is it okay for people to call you Steph?
Yes, yeah. There's two people in the whole wide world that call me Steffi. One of them has passed away. The other one, I just talked to him yesterday, but he's my old next door neighbor. He's the only one that's allowed to call me Steffi. The only one in the whole wide world, and my dad, but those are the two.
Noted. What are you reading right now?
I just finished David Brooks' A Road to Character.
Excellent.
I had a very thought-provoking conversation with someone. Someone sent me this book 2 years ago, and I finally had a chance to read it. But, and I think it's apropos for this conversation, but how it's a great read. Anyways, the point is that how do you build character? How is character formed? And I'm really, really intrigued by this for my children. Trying to understand how do I raise productive, contributing citizens, and how do you instill character in them? And it's a great read.
I will check it out. We actually have a question that came in. Chris is wondering about your hobbies outside of work.
Skiing, traveling, spending time outdoors, reading, cooking. I love to cook.
Any particular kind of cuisine?
Doesn't matter. My favorite new addiction during COVID, my mom and I, New York Times cooking app, their recipes are super easy, amazing, and great. And so every weekend I'm trying something new.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One of the questions is, what do you think is the most important of all leadership qualities? I believe you said humility.
Humility.
What's your favorite place to eat in Modesto?
My home.
Nice. When you cook or when somebody else cooks?
When I cook.
Okay.
I love cooking for my family. It makes me so happy.
Right on.
But the best part is that my husband I can make disastrous meals. Chris will eat it all. The foodie of all foodies in my household is my son. He's so in Spanish, there's a word called chiquiado. My mom calls him a mamon, which in Italian is, a little princeling son. He is a foodie.
That's awesome.
He likes his pasta fresh. He can tell, yeah, he's annoying, but yes.
How old is he?
He's 11, 12 next month, but he's a little princeling when it comes to food.
That's amazing. Coffee or tea?
Both.
Okay. How do you manage your stress?
Really work out. I need time alone, just by myself with my thoughts. And pray. I believe in a higher power than myself. And as I say to my daughter when she's stressed, I'm going to just pull out your rosary. And I promise you that once you get through the rosary, you'll be okay. And so I pray a lot.
Awesome. If you could pick another job to do other than the one that you have, what would you attempt?
I am a huge college football fan. I don't care what type of college football is on. I would love to be like a Kirk Herbstreit on College game day on Saturdays and travel around to the different big time college games.
Wait, you'd want to be a what?
A broadcast journalist.
Oh, okay.
College game days on Saturday and traveling around to the different sports venues and watching college sports or something like college football. I love the pageantry. I love everything. The underdog nature of it. I love everything about it.
That's awesome. Okay, what's a job you would never, ever, ever do?
Anything that involves extreme cold.
Okay.
I don't know what that entails, but I love to ski. Love it. But I always think of myself would I really want to be ski patrol? But extreme cold. It could be cold. Nothing that involves extreme cold.
Okay. And then the last question is, what do you hope people say or remember or feel about you after you're gone? And the context is you can pick when you retire or die. It's up to you.
I call this the funeral principle. I wrote this down last night. I hope someone would say that she was an amazing partner and wife, mother, daughter, friend, while she was being a force for good in the world, and that she had fun doing it.
Nice. Well, that's it from me. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Stephanie?
No, I think it's great that you're doing this. I think it's awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm humbled.
I've been so delighted to have this conversation. I feel like people have enjoyed themselves. Nothing but appreciation for all that you do here and for the time that you took. It's no small thing.
Anytime when Kate calls.
I will leverage that influence, I suppose. Trish, I'll toss this back over to you.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate an opportunity to meet you and to learn and listen about you. As I mentioned, my daughter works there, and so hear about the company and the great things that you guys collectively have done to look out for your employees this past year. And I know that what you said is true. It was transparent, and they understood where you were headed and what you were hoping to accomplish. And so I appreciate that. I think it also points out that the leaders at the top don't get to rest very often, and it's critical to find the opportunity. And what Ryan was talking about, I think that's why all I wanted for my birthday is I need a garden blitz. I'm buying dirt and pots and plants, and I just need to be outside because I needed that outdoor sunshine, fresh air space away from everything. And I got props from my family. I didn't open my laptop once the whole weekend.
That's
But
awesome.
there's times, I mean, we just need to shut off, but this is, so.
Yeah. I always say that there's big jobs for big people. That's one of my sayings, my new sayings around here. And when you have a big job, you deal with big problems. So you don't have a choice. You got to step up and lead. So
Right. And I think a good takeaway from this, you touched on it and I thought of it as you mentioned it, is a big key word for this past year has been how we've all learned to have more grace towards people.
Yeah.
Because I think it was across the board, the leaders, the companies, the employees, no one knew what was happening in the moment. It took grace for all of us to get through it together one way or another at home and at work. And so this is a key element as well. Really appreciate your time and your message today.
well, thank you. Is this it, Kate? I get to go?
Yeah, you're excused. As is everyone else, I believe.
Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks,
See you
all.
later.
That was great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.